Hey there, I'm Mark, and life's got this funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. You think you've got it all figured out, and then bam, everything changes. That's exactly where my story starts, with a shocking discovery in the least likely of places, my wife's car. The title of today's story is Caught Her Cheating When I Found a Condom in Her Car, the Ultimate Betrayal. Join me as I take you through the twists and turns that led to the unraveling of my marriage. It was a Tuesday. I needed to grab some groceries, and Claire, that's my wife, her car was blocking mine. So, I figured, why not just use hers? It's funny how the smallest decisions can lead to the biggest changes. I'm driving along, humming to some old tune on the radio, when I realized I forgot the shopping list. Trust me to forget my head if it wasn't screwed on, right? I pulled over, rummaging through the glove compartment for a pen and paper. And that's when I found it, an unopened condom packet, tucked away beneath a pile of old receipts and gum wrappers. Now, Claire and we've been married for a good 7 years. We've had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we stopped using those things after we decided to try for a kid. That was years ago, so you can imagine the cold knot that started forming in my stomach. For a moment, I just sat there, turning the packet over in my hands. It was one of those fancy brands, not the kind you'd expect to find forgotten in a car. The expiration date was next year. Fresh, new. I remember the ride home. It felt longer than usual, every traffic light mocking me with its red glare, every second stretching out like an accusation. My mind was racing with a million thoughts, but one kept pushing its way to the forefront. Was Claire cheating on me? When I got home, I did the whole normal routine. Asked her how her day was, listened to her talk about work and the new fitness class she joined. She seemed so normal. So, Claire, it was surreal. I wanted to blurt out my discovery, confront her right there. But something held me back. Fear, maybe, or maybe I just didn't want to face the possibility that my life wasn't what I thought it was. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Claire was asleep next to me, her breathing steady and peaceful. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. My mind kept replaying our past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. Late nights at work, those new friends she'd made at the gym, her phone buzzing at odd hours. Sleep didn't come easy that night. And when it did, it was filled with dreams of shadows and whispers, a maze of doubts and half-seen faces. I woke up feeling like I'd run a marathon, every part of me heavy with a sense of impending doom. The next few days were a blur of observation and paranoia. I noticed how she'd started taking her phone everywhere with her, even to the bathroom. How she'd quickly change the screen if I walked by. I tried to shake the feeling off, told myself I was being ridiculous. But you know what they say about gut feelings. They're rarely wrong, and mine was screaming at me that something was off. I just didn't know what to do with that information. Confronting her seemed like stepping off a cliff. Ignorance, as they say, is bliss. But is it really, when every look, every touch, feels tainted with doubt? That's where my journey began, in a haze of confusion and mistrust. Little did I know, it was only going to get more complicated from there. So there I was, playing the world's worst detective in the most messed up episode of my life. I started watching Claire like a hawk, looking for anything. Any little thing that might scream, "Hey Mark, your wife's stepping out on you." Every day became this bizarre game of observation. I'd notice the smallest changes, a new perfume scent clinging to her when she came home, her coming back from work later than usual, phone calls where she'd quickly leave the room. None of it was a smoking gun, but boy, did it add fuel to the fire raging in my mind. I tried to act normal, but inside, I was a mess. My thoughts were constantly circling back to that damn condom packet. Sometimes, I'd catch myself just staring at Claire, trying to read her, figure out what was going on behind those eyes I thought I knew so well. Then, one evening, something happened. It was garbage day, so I was hauling out the trash, and I found this crumpled receipt from a restaurant tucked into the kitchen bin. It was for 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine. Claire had told me she was working late that night. I remember feeling this jolt of shock, mixed with an odd sense of vindication. It was like, aha, gotcha. I confronted her about it. Tried to keep my voice steady, but it probably came out all accusing like, "Hey, found this receipt. You didn't mention going out for dinner the other night." Her reaction? Annoyance. Pure and simple, she rolled her eyes, told me it was a lunch meeting with a client, that they'd taken the receipt for expenses, but must have accidentally given her a copy. She made it sound so mundane, so plausible. I wanted to believe her. God. I wanted to just laugh it off, call myself a paranoid idiot, and move on. But something in the pit of my stomach just wouldn't let me. It's like when you start suspecting something, everything becomes a clue, a piece of the puzzle. After that, things between us got tense. I couldn't shake off the feeling that she was hiding something. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much she'd changed recently. There were all these little things. Like, she'd started working out more, which was great, but she'd never been much into fitness before. Her wardrobe had changed too, nothing drastic, but she was definitely dressing sharper, more, I don't know, attractively. And her phone. That damn phone was always with her, always buzzing with new messages. I remember one night, lying in bed next to her, watching the soft glow of her phone screen lighting up her face. She thought I was asleep, but I was just lying there, wondering who was on the other end of those messages. And then there were the late nights. She'd always been a bit of a workaholic, but it was getting ridiculous. Always some project, some deadline that kept her at the office till all hours. I started to wonder, were they really all work-related? I felt like I was going crazy, second-guessing everything, doubting the woman I'd shared my life with for almost a decade. But I couldn't let it go. It was like this nagging voice in the back of my head, constantly whispering that something wasn't right. So, I did what any sane person would do. Note the sarcasm here. I started snooping more. I'd check her browser history when she was in the shower, try to glance at her phone screen over her shoulder. I hated myself for it, felt like some creepy stalker instead of her husband. But I just had to know. One day, while she was out running errands, I even went through her closet and drawers. I told myself I was looking for more receipts, any physical proof. But deep down, I think I was just trying to find a connection to the woman I felt I was losing. Everything I found was so painfully normal. Clothes, shoes, old books, bits of jewelry. No secret love letters, no hidden burner phone. Just the everyday stuff of the woman I loved and, possibly, the woman who was betraying me. It's funny, in a twisted way. You think you know someone, think you built this life together, and then one day, you're sifting through their belongings, looking for evidence that they're lying to you. It's a special kind of hell, let me tell you. But despite all my snooping, all my paranoia, I didn't find anything concrete. Just a bunch of maybes and what ifs. I was stuck in this limbo, torn between wanting to confront her with my suspicions and fearing what that confrontation would bring. In the end, I didn't have to make that decision. Because that's when things took a turn for the bizarre. That's when I found something that changed everything. Okay, so here's where things start getting a little, let's say, film noir. I started tailing Claire. Yeah, I know how it sounds. Creepy, obsessive, choose your adjective. But the thing is, the suspicion was eating me alive. I had to know the truth, even if it meant crossing lines I never thought I'd even approach. One afternoon, I decided to follow her. She said she was meeting a friend for coffee. Something about the way she said it, that slight hesitation, set off alarm bells in my head. So, I got into my car and trailed her from a distance. She went to this quaint little cafe downtown, the kind with cozy boobs and a constant hum of conversation. I sat in my car across the street, feeling like a complete stalker. I watched her walk in, and a few minutes later, this guy joined her. Tall, well-dressed, with a confidence in his stride that made my stomach churn. They sat in a booth by the window, laughing and talking. From where I sat, I could see their expressions, the easy way they leaned into each other's space. It was intimate, too intimate. My hand was gripping the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned white. I remember thinking, this is it, Mark. This is what you were afraid of. But a part of me still hoped I was wrong, that there was an innocent explanation for all of this. Maybe he was just an old friend, maybe. I drove home before they left the cafe, couldn't stomach watching any longer. Back home, I was a bundle of nerves. Claire came back later, humming some tune, acting like everything was normal. It took every ounce of self-control I had not to confront her right then and there. Instead, I waited for my chance to snoop on her phone. Yeah, I know, invasion of privacy and all that. But I was desperate, so when she went to take a shower, I grabbed her phone from the bedside table. I felt like a criminal as I quickly scanned through her messages, her call history. But there was nothing, no incriminating texts, no mysterious calls. It was all so frustratingly normal. Friends, family, work stuff. I even checked her photos, but all I found were selfies, pictures of our dog, random shots of our last vacation. I sat there, her phone in my hand, feeling like the world's biggest idiot. Was I just being paranoid? Was my imagination running wild, conjuring up affairs and betrayals where there were none? I mean, what was I expecting to find? Some explicit texts, a secret second life? I put her phone back, my mind a whirlwind of doubt and confusion. Claire came back from her shower, all smiles and casual chatter. I just nodded along, my mind miles away. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, I felt like I was next to a stranger. It's a strange feeling, lying beside someone you've shared your life with, wondering if you ever really knew them at all. Every laugh, every touch, was it all just a lie? Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Claire, looking for anything out of the ordinary. But everything seemed to go back to normal. Work, gym, the occasional outing with friends. If she was having an affair, she was damn good at covering her tracks. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was just seeing things that weren't there. What then? There were these little moments, these tiny slip-ups that kept the embers of my suspicion alive. Like the way she'd quickly end phone calls when I walked into the room, or how she'd become more protective of her phone, always making sure it was within her reach. I even tried casually asking about her day, her friends, trying to gauge her reactions. But Claire was a closed book. She'd answer my questions with a smile, never giving away anything more than surface details. I was stuck in this limbo of doubt and uncertainty. Part of me wanted to just let it go, to chalk it up to a rough patch in our marriage and move on. But another part, a louder part, kept pushing me to dig deeper, to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. So, I continued my little game of cat and mouse, watching, waiting, hoping for something, anything, that would either confirm my fears or put them to rest. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to realize something. Living in a constant state of suspicion was no way to live at all. I needed answers, one way or another. And little did I know, those answers were closer than I thought. 2 days after the cafe incident, I hit a breaking point. You know that feeling when something's eating you up inside, and you just gotta let it out, consequences be damned? That was me, standing in our kitchen, watching Claire cook dinner, pretending like everything was just peachy. Finally, I blurted out, "Claire, we need to talk. Who's the guy you were with at the cafe?" Her reaction? A mix of surprise and this sort of frustrated annoyance. She turned off the stove, faced me with her arms crossed, and said, "He's just a friend, Mark. You're acting crazy." And that's how our big blow-up started. Our kitchen, which had seen many a peaceful meal, suddenly turned into a battlefield. She denied everything, said I was being paranoid, that there was nothing going on. She kept asking me to trust her, but trust is a fragile thing. Once it starts cracking, good luck trying to patch it up. I wanted to believe her. Every fiber of my being was screaming for me to just accept her explanation and move on. But there was this nagging voice in my head, a persistent little whisper that kept saying, "What if?" The argument escalated. I asked about the changes in her behavior, the late nights, the secrecy with her phone. She had an answer for everything. Work stress, needing some personal space, a desire to feel good about herself. It all sounded reasonable, but there was a part of me that just couldn't buy it completely. We went round and round, our voices getting louder, our words more cutting. It's funny, in a sad way, how quickly love can turn to anger when fear and doubt are thrown into the mix. We were no longer just husband and wife. We were opponents in an emotional tug of war, each trying to pull the other into our own version of reality. I accused her of lying, of cheating. She accused me of not trusting her, of being obsessed. The words stung. They hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic. I saw tears in her eyes, and damn it, my heart ached. I hated that we were doing this, that I'd let my suspicions drag us down this dark path. But once you open Pandora's box, you can't just shove everything back in and close the lid. The doubts, the fears, the hurt, they were all out in the open now, swirling around us like some malevolent storm. Eventually, the storm passed, as they tend to do. We were left standing in the ruins of our once peaceful evening, emotionally exhausted, each lost in our own turmoil. Claire wiped her eyes, muttered something about needing some air, and left the house. I just stood there, in the silence of our kitchen, feeling like the biggest jerk on the planet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the argument in my head, analyzing every word, every expression. Part of me was scared that I'd pushed her too far, that this might be the beginning of the end for us. Another part was still clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong about everything. The next day, Claire was distant. We moved around each other like two strangers, polite but cautious. The air was thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I wanted to reach out, to try and fix things, but I didn't know how. It felt like we were standing on either side of a chasm, with no bridge in sight. As the days passed, the tension between us grew. We were stuck in this weird limbo, neither of us knowing how to move forward. It was like we were both waiting for something to happen, something that would either mend the cracks in our relationship or break it apart completely. And then, something did happen. Something that changed the game entirely. That night, when everything changed, started off like any other in our new, tension-filled normal. Claire said she was going out to clear her head, get some space. I was left alone, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt too big, too empty. I was mindlessly flipping through channels when her phone, left on the coffee table, buzzed to life. Instinctively, I reached for it. Caller ID was just a number, no name. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered it. Hello. Claire's phone, I said, trying to sound casual. The voice on the other end was male, confident, a little too smooth for my liking. Hey, it's me. Can I talk to Claire? I felt my heart rate spike. It was him, the guy from the cafe. My mind raced. I needed to play this cool. Sorry, she's not here right now. Can I take a message? I tried to keep my voice steady, disguising it slightly. There was a pause, then a cautious, no, that's okay. I'll call back later, and he hung up, just like that, but that brief exchange was enough. It was him, the guy the first saw with Claire. I sat there, her phone in my hand, my mind reeling. This was it, the proof I'd been so desperately searching for, and yet, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Claire came home later, finding me in the same spot, her phone still in my hand. I saw the moment she realized I'd answered it. Her face went white, her eyes wide with something that looked a lot like fear. We need to talk, Claire, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. She just nodded, taking a seat across from me. The air was heavy, charged with a tension that felt almost tangible. I told her about the call, about the guy asking for her. I watched her closely, looking for any sign, any tell that would give her away. And then, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with sobs. It's true, Mark, I've been having an affair. I'm so sorry. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Even though I'd suspected, hearing her say it out loud was a whole different kind of pain. It was real now, undeniable. I felt a range of emotions crashing over me. Anger, hurt, betrayal. But more than anything, I felt lost. This was Claire, my Claire, the woman I'd shared my life with, my dreams, my bed. And she'd been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. Why, Claire? Why him? Why this? The questions poured out of me, each one like a blow to the chest. She tried to explain, through her tears, about feeling neglected, about needing something more. She talked about how we'd drifted apart, how she'd felt lonely and unappreciated. It was like listening to a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. I listened, but it was hard to hear past the roar of betrayal in my ears. She said it was a mistake, that she regretted it, that she wanted to work things out. But the trust was shattered, broken into a million pieces. We talked, or rather, she talked and I listened, for what felt like hours. But the more she said, the more distant I felt. It was like standing on the shore, watching our marriage, our life together, drift away into a sea of lies and deceit. That night, I slept on the couch. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling a profound sense of emptiness. I was at a crossroads, torn between the life I thought I had and the reality that was crashing down around me. The next few days were a blur. We were like two ghosts, haunting the same house, barely speaking, barely acknowledging each other. I was trapped in a cycle of anger and sadness, not sure how to break free. I thought about leaving, just packing my bags and walking away. But it wasn't that simple. There was our history, our shared memories, the love that, despite everything, still lingered somewhere in the depths of my heart. But could I ever trust her again? Could we ever go back to how things were? The answer seemed to be a resounding no, echoing in the silence between us. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, life threw another curveball my way. The days that followed Claire's confession felt like walking through a surreal, feverish nightmare. Words like divorce and separation, once unthinkable, became part of our daily vocabulary. We were two people caught in a whirlwind of hurt, anger, and disappointment, trying to make sense of a life that had suddenly turned upside down. Negotiations about who'd get what were petty and painful. We'd sit across the table, discussing assets and memories like they were just items on a checklist. Our home, once filled with laughter and love, had become a battleground of bitterness and regret. Claire lost a lot in the fallout. Her marriage, for starters. Then there was her reputation. Once word got out about the affair, friends began to choose sides. It was ugly and spiteful, the kind of drama you'd expect from a bad TV show, not real life. And the guy, her lover from the cafe, turned out he was married, with kids. A whole other life Claire either didn't know about or chose to ignore. When his wife found out, that little fling crumbled like a house of cards. He wasn't about to leave his family, and Claire was left with nothing but broken promises and a shattered heart. As for me, I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I hardly recognized anymore. I moved out, found a small apartment that felt more like a temporary shelter than a home. The walls were bare, the rooms echoed with the kind of silence that only comes from loss. In the quiet of my new place, I'd often find myself sifting through memories, trying to figure out where things went wrong. Was there a moment, a sign I missed? Could I have done something different, been a better husband, a better friend? I knew deep down that these were pointless questions. What happened, happened. Claire made her choices, and now we were both living with the consequences. But knowing that didn't make the nights any less lonely or the mornings any less daunting. I had been right about my suspicions, but the victory was hollow. There was no satisfaction in having uncovered the truth, only a profound sense of loss. I had lost my wife, my partner, my best friend. In trying to hold on to the truth, I had let go of a part of myself. The divorce was finalized with a cold, bureaucratic efficiency. We signed papers in a sterile office, our once vibrant relationship reduced to a few signatures and legal terms. Claire and I barely spoke. What was there to say? Goodbye, sorry, none of it seemed enough. Life moved on, as it always does. I immersed myself in work, in hobbies, in anything that could fill the void. Friends tried to be supportive, setting me up on blind dates, inviting me to social gatherings. But I was a ghost among the living, going through the motions without really being present. Claire reached out a few times, emails mostly, expressing remorse, a desire to talk. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. Maybe one day we could find a way to be in each other's lives, but that day was not today. As months turned into a year, I started to feel like I was waking up from a long, troubled sleep. The pain was still there, a dull ache in the background, but it was no longer the all-consuming force it once was. I began to realize that life, for all its unpredictability and heartache, still had a lot to offer. I discovered new passions, rekindled old friendships, and started to appreciate the simple, everyday moments that I had taken for granted. Looking back, I can't say I regret the path my life has taken. Sure, there are things I wish had gone differently, words I wish I could take back, moments I wish I could relive. But every experience, good or bad, shapes us into who we are. I don't know what the future holds, and that's okay. I've learned that it's not the certainty of the path that matters, but the journey itself. And my journey, though marked by scars, is still very much worth walking. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. If you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear it. Your support means the world to me and helps me continue to bring you real-life stories that resonate. Until next time, take care and remember, trust and honesty are the bedrock of— Hey everyone! Welcome back to our channel where we share real-life stories that are both shocking and heart-wrenching. Today, we have an incredible tale titled, Husband Catches Cheating Wife Red-Handed. You won't believe what happened next. Buckle up because this story is filled with unexpected twists and emotional confrontations. My flight was delayed by over an hour due to what the airline described as a minor technical issue. I have an aversion to flying anyway, so this didn't do much to boost my confidence. At any rate, it was a pleasant surprise to me that we, after an unusually bumpy flight, landed safely. With a sigh of relief, I walked out of the terminal building on a hot Florida afternoon and eventually got into the large, air-conditioned limousine that was waiting for me. Although the thought of having to make the return trip in just a day or two was twirling somewhere in the back of my mind, I had more important things on my mind at the moment. I was once again very nervous as I climbed out of the car outside the hotel. I was in an unfamiliar city, in a country I had only seen in movies and on television. Unfortunately, mostly crime shows. Not the kind of programs that give you confidence in your safety when visiting these places, especially if, like me, you don't travel much. Anyway, as I got out of the car, I was somewhat relieved to find that Paul and Della recognized me immediately and spoke to me. Hi, Mike. We weren't sure you'd make it in time. We'll get the luggage and send it to the room. Now you better get going. She's waiting in the lobby, Della said. Paul gave me a brief nod of greeting and headed to the back of the car to get my suitcase from the driver. I must admit, I hadn't expected the place to be so grand. The hotel lobby was gigantic, and there seemed to be several hundred people wandering everywhere. In reality, there were probably no more than 30 or 40. How the hell do they expect me to find a woman I've never seen in my life? God only knows. I asked myself as an extremely attractive woman suddenly appeared in front of me, dressed in a small red, obviously designer, cocktail dress, and holding a matching clutch in her left hand. Mike? She asked with a charming smile. Yes, Holly? I whispered back, somewhat stunned by her unexpected beauty. Under the circumstances, Holly was not what I had expected. Holly smiled again, but surprised me even more by hugging me and kissing me on the cheek. Overcoming the initial shock, I summoned up all my courage and returned the favor. Sorry, it must be an English thing. We don't usually hug women we've never met before. By then, though, Holly and I had been emailing and talking to each other on the phone for months, preparing for this little encounter. I really didn't know what to expect. Did you have a good flight? She asked. No, Holly, I don't need any more flights. I replied, then explained. A few years ago, I was involved in a very rough landing. In fact, it wasn't far from a crash. The airplane made a real mess, but I think the local scrap metal dealers were pleased. At any rate, it kind of shattered my confidence in air transportation. Had I known that such a beautiful lady would meet me here and I'd be lucky enough to spend an entire evening with her, then maybe the flight wouldn't have been so bad. Thank you. I'm very flattered that such a handsome gentleman would pay me such a compliment. It's not flattery, Holly. In fact, I find you so beautiful that I have to wonder how we ever got into this situation in the first place. I don't know if it was embarrassment or nervousness that made me sway like that. In retrospect, I usually never talked to a woman or flirted the way I did with Holly for the next 2 hours. Notice, Looking back at what I actually said, I have to admit that most of the time I was talking absolute nonsense. My mother always said that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Maybe some people's eyes don't see what others see, Holly replied. I'm sorry, but I found the last few months very depressing except for our correspondence. Holly smiled. I thought the whole thing would really upset you. Oh, don't think so, Holly. It was only in the beginning, but then I enjoyed our little emails and chats, and it became so necessary that I was really looking forward to it. Honestly, for weeks now, I've been looking forward to coming here and meeting in person. Holly, I looked her over from head to toe. If I'd known how beautiful you were, it's a hell of a surprise. I still don't understand why you chose me. And who better than 34-year-old Mike Crosby married to Avril, Holly grimaced. For 10 years now, they don't have kids. Rumor has it it's Avril's choice. Mike is a maintenance manager at a hospital near where they live. He hates that job, by the way. God, you're so thorough, I exclaimed. No, not me, Mike, but the people I hire. I have some pictures of you. Holly's face flashed with a questioning expression for a second, and another thing. You look very smart in them. Maybe those pictures are the reason I chose you as my secret lover tonight. She smiled at me and winked slightly. I think you're flattering me, Holly, I replied, smiling. Fortunately, at that moment we were interrupted by Paul and Ella, the couple who had met me outside the hotel, coming over to join us. The boy took the luggage to the room. Mike, now are you both ready for the big show? Paul asked. We always are. How about you, Holly? I asked, throwing the ball into her court. Yeah, I think I'm ready, she replied. I looked somewhat reticent, considering we were going through this whole charade at her insistence. Look, Holly, you know you don't have to do this. Once we get in there, you'll realize there's no turning back. I can even go in there myself if you want. Don't be silly, Mike. That would defeat the purpose of the drill, wouldn't it? Do you really think I came all the way from Montreal to miss out on the fun? Come on, be brave. So shall we go? Holly said, taking my hand. But then she looked at Paul and asked, intimate enough. I guess I should have felt awkward, but for some reason I didn't. Come on, guys. Married or not, you all know what it feels like when a beautiful woman gets a little closer than she really should. We all have instincts that can, if you let them, take over in circumstances like this. My baser natural instincts definitely took over, although I was very nervous. I couldn't think of any reason to try to control them. Yeah, come on, guys. You two lovers, you're having a secret date away from your spouses. Make it look right, replied Della in a voice like a movie director. Without my permission, Holly put her left arm around my waist and her right arm around my waist. Then she pressed herself very close to me. Normally, I would have thought close to the point of awkwardness. Yeah, here's the ticket. Go ahead and try it and don't forget all those gooey eyes. Dilla gibold. It won't be that hard, I replied, looking at Holly beside me. Hey, watch out, Holly. Looks like our Mike is out here on the hunt, Della commented. Holly didn't answer, or rather she couldn't answer because when I looked down at her, she caught me off guard again and kissed me on the lips. Sorry, Mike, she said, sensing my embarrassment. I should have asked, but I need to make sure my lipstick is convincingly smeared. Holly, when you want to smudge your lipstick, don't ask. Maybe I should apply for a full-time job as a lipstick smudger, I said and kissed her. Yeah, well, it's not every day you get a chance to kiss a woman as beautiful as Holly. Married or not, I'm only human. Sorry to interrupt you guys, but are we doing this or not? Because if you want, we can skip right to the bedroom scene. Dilla laughed. Maybe later on, Holly whispered to me, giggling, before tugging lightly on my waist and dragging me toward the hotel lobby. Despite all her demonstrative bravado, I could sense that Holly was almost as nervous as I was, so I took the remark as nervous chatter. Entering the living room was a bit of a disappointment, really. The place was pretty crowded, but I'll add that I noticed a few guys showing much more than mild interest in the stunning woman in the little red cocktail dress snuggled against my side. Not that I could blame them. I was having a hell of a hard time not looking at the incredible cleavage Holly was showing off in that dress. I think I strutted around looking as important as the cat that ate the canary. It had been a long time since I had been so proud of the woman I was accompanying. Paul and Della took the lead, and we followed them to a table against the wall. The waiter came over, and we ordered our drinks, and I found sitting with my back to most of this room uncomfortable because I could only stare at the stage where a small orchestra was playing. I actually wanted to scrutinize everyone in the place, but that might give the game away. Our drinks arrived, and the four of us made small talk, mostly about my delayed flight. This isn't good. I think we're going to have to up the ante, Paul said. Didn't they see us? Holly asked. Too immersed in themselves, I don't think they've said a word to the other since we came in. Go on, you two. Mind your own business. I held out my hand, and Holly took it as we both stood up. I have to warn you, Holly, that I'm not Jean Kelly, I warned her. I'm sure you can handle it, love, Holly replied with a grin. Love? I asked. But that's what you're supposed to be tonight, isn't it? Oh yes, it's a damn shame we have to play these silly games, isn't it? Who's playing? Holly said, winking at me, wrapping both arms around my neck and pulling me to her. I wish, I thought to myself. God, if the guys in the office could see me now. It was already the third set since we'd arrived, and they were playing slower. Oh my God, did I really do that? Holly asked, squeezing into me. I'm sorry, but desirable women usually do that to me, I replied, blushing slightly. I can't say we actually danced, literally. We just swayed in the same spot, slowly twirling around. I have to say it was one of the most enjoyable dances I've had in years. Suddenly another couple pushed us slightly. You've been spotted, Paul whispered. Be careful, you might look the wrong way. Concentrate on the dance. I looked at Holly again, who was smiling charmingly back at me. Holly, you're one hell of an actress, I thought to myself. You know, I hope the balloon doesn't go up too soon. I like that, I told her. I can feel it, love, she said with a cheeky grin, and then pressed herself even tighter against me. I wonder, Holly, if you have sadistic tendencies, I remarked, smiling. I like to tease Mike. This evening was the best joke I could think of. I don't know what expression appeared on my face, but it made Holly laugh out loud. I only wished I really was the person she was really teasing, but I knew the good Lord could never look at me so favorably. Oh, don't look so dejected, Mike. After all, you don't have to rush back to the UK, do you? We can always take a few days to enjoy the Florida sunshine. Now that we've been spotted, let's make it look really good. Next thing I know, Holly's head is resting on my shoulder, and she's chewing on my neck and earlobe. Hey, take it easy, girl, or I'll have an accident. I warned. Holly giggled in response and, more importantly, didn't stop her manipulations. She doubled down on them, for that matter. Much to my relief, the band's performance ended before I lost control, and we returned to our table. Holly was walking, holding my hand and dragging me along behind her. When we got closer, Paul gestured for us to sit down, but his eyes were fixed on something that was happening across the room. That's right. He's on his way. When he comes over, you can stand there and argue with him. But don't raise your hand at him, Mike. We can handle any rough stuff. That's what we're paid to do. Paul said, stepping forward. Is she coming? I asked. No, I don't think she realized it was you. That's if she saw you at all. She was standing with her back to the dance floor. But she's watching intently now, so she'll probably spot you as soon as you stand up and turn around. What the hell is going on here, Holly? What are you doing here? And what the hell are you playing with that asshole? Who is he anyway? Asked an angry voice from somewhere not far from my left shoulder. I stood up and turned to face the guy. Holly was dancing with that asshole, just like you no doubt danced with my wife. Well, yeah. At that moment, that was the best I could think of. I didn't know what I was going to say when the confrontation started. Holly, on the other hand, who also stood up, had obviously rehearsed her little speech well. And he'll probably have me later while you're sleeping with his wife in room 642. By the way, we have 643 right across the hall, but we'll try not to make as much noise as you two did last night, Holly said with a smile on her face and put her arm around my shoulders. I really could have done without Holly at this point because her husband, who was much bigger than I thought he was, could very well have pounced on me, and Holly hanging on to me limited my maneuvering. But I really didn't have to worry about him. Avril's appearance on stage, I suppose after she'd spotted me as soon as I stood up, was much more, exciting. Honestly, Avril came out of nowhere and hit me in the forehead, obviously on the run. Effectively knocking Holly's husband off his feet, she pushed him out of the way. In a way, it was convenient because it took away some of Avril's momentum. Holly's husband laid down on some poor woman's lap before he fell to the floor. Notice I didn't see this. I was lying on the floor myself looking at my very angry wife. I think the fall to the floor shook Avril up a bit, as it did me. Anyway, she ended up lying on top of me, looking me in the face. "What the hell were you doing with that slut?" she asked demandingly. "Dancing, as you can see," I replied, still without the jazzy cuteness. "It looks like you were trying to fuck that girl," she objected. "Come on, Avril, I just got here. I haven't had a chance yet. You've been sleeping with her husband for at least the last 2 days." I was pleased with myself. I had taken my first good shot. "Yeah, but don't be so stupid, Mike. Where did you get this stupid idea?" Avril said, rolling off me and sitting up. "How did you even get here? You don't fly, do you?" "Yes, but not when I want to catch my wife with her lover," I answered. I was good at that backhanded stuff. "That's bullshit, Mike. You know I'm here on a business trip." "Avril, your business trip was to Houston. It's freaking Florida. You and your company have no business being here in Miami. You had a meeting in Houston, and then you flew here. And you've spent the last 2 nights horizontal tangoing with that creep in room 643. 642, lover. 643 is our room." Holly's voice corrected me from somewhere. "Yes, sorry, room 642. Do you want to see the tapes, Avril?" I asked. I had no idea if Holly had any tapes from this trip, but I knew that she had many from their previous dates. I figured Avril wouldn't really want to see them. Avril just sat on the floor and looked at me. I have to admit that this was the first time I had ever seen this woman speechless. No, not like that. I remember the first time I slept with her before we were even married. By the time I was done with her, she was lying there speechless. I always thought I'd shaken all the chatter out of her. Well, it wasn't a disappointment to her. She came back for more the next night and eventually married me. What a shame. Suddenly someone's hands helped us to our feet, and the next thing I really realized, besides Holly's arm around my waist again, was Paul saying, "Morgan Ardent, you're served." And he handed Holly's rather disheveled husband an envelope. I wonder what I missed that made Morgan so disheveled. Paul then quickly did the same to Avril. Although our British divorce petitions don't really have to be presented as formally as the Yanks do, I could send them by registered mail, I guess. Holly and I just figured it would add a bit of spice if it was done officially and at the same time as the papers were handed to her husband. The two guys who followed the two lovers along with the rest of the company were then handed the papers. Holly took care of everything. Avril and Morgan worked for an American company, so we both sued her in the American courts for turning a blind eye to what was going on with the couple. Their bosses, who were served papers, had their girlfriends too. So I think the bloody company must have turned a blind eye to everything. Eventually, Paul filed a lawsuit against Morgan Ardent for alienation of affection, which Holly's lawyers filed precisely in the American courts on my behalf. It had been years since anyone had successfully done such a thing in the UK. It ended as abruptly as it began. I really have no idea where or when Avril disappeared. Holly said she was led away in tears by one of her boss's girlfriends, but I didn't see her leave. I did, however, see Holly's husband being led away by two guys. Notice, not before he threw me a look that I thought should have turned me to stone. "So what now?" I asked Holly. "We're dancing." She responded with a smile and dragged me to the dance floor again. The rest of the evening turned into a bit of a party. I have no idea at what time the party ended. I'm afraid I had too much to drink myself, but I do remember a conversation we overheard in the elevator. One of the hotel staff was telling a couple how lucky they were because the hotel was full, but for some reason the couple in 642 had suddenly checked out. The housekeeping staff was still in room 642 when Holly, Paul, Della, and I entered room 643. "Too bad. It takes away from the rest of the fun of the evening," Holly said. I couldn't wait to see their faces when we walked out of that room together in the morning. Maybe it's not such a bad thing. It might give their lawyers leverage in court, Paul commented. Paul, I have enough information on what these two have been doing for the last 6 months to get 2 divorces. Besides, I have the prenup that my father insisted on. He never thought much of Morgan. Yeah, but what about Mike? They don't have prenuptial agreements in the UK. I'm still screwed, Paul. My lawyer thinks it's going to be 50 to 50. The only light in the sky is that Avril makes more money than me, I said. Yeah, I think heads are about to fly in this company and Morgan and Avril will be first on the list. My uncle is a major shareholder and he's already on the case, Holly informed us. I had a hard time slowing him down or we would have missed out on today's fun. There wasn't really that much going on. Not a lot of fireworks. Quite an expense on your part, Holly, for something that could have been done at home, I said, voicing my thoughts. Mike. The look on Morgan's face when you said he slept with your wife was classic. He had no idea who you were. Did I say that? No, not in those words. You're too much of a but I did. And the look on Morgan's face when he realized he hadn't caught me, I had, or rather we had caught them, was something special. And then Avril burst through like a defender at the finish line. The funniest thing I've seen in a long time, Holly said and laughed out loud. God knows how long we chatted about nothing in particular, but eventually made it to bed. Oh, I better remind you that room 643 was a suite. I had one bedroom and Holly had the other. When we went to bed, Paul and Della were sitting in the living room. When we got up in the morning, they were sitting there. Apparently, Paul was a court officer. I have no idea what that means. But I realized that the American courts would take his words almost as gospel, meaning he could swear that Holly and I didn't spend the night in the same bed. So Mike, what's your plan now? Holly asked me at breakfast. I'm not sure I'm going home to lick my wounds, I answered. Well, the lovers are gone. Why don't you and I fly to Vegas for a few days before you come home? That's a good idea, Holly, but I'm going back to the UK. I'm sorry, but adding another flight to Las Vegas is not my idea of a good time. Holly sat there quite obviously thinking for a few moments. Flying upsets you that much, doesn't it? Okay, alternative idea. A close friend of mine has a house in the Bahamas. Why don't we go there for a few days? Don't worry, we can go by boat and you won't even have to risk me driving. I had to think about it, but not for very long. After crossing the Atlantic, it would have been silly to fly straight to the UK, considering I had almost 2 weeks of summer vacation left. I had to get back home because there was bound to be a real old ding-dong. The house was already on the market, and I'd converted everything to cash so she wouldn't empty all the joint accounts. Keep in mind that even though my lawyer oversaw all the changes I made, I still thought I was going to screw up. It was his job to keep me from going completely broke. Yeah, why not? A good ferry cruise should be fun. But can you just show up at your friends' houses uninvited? Of course I have a standing invitation. I don't visit them as often as I should. What about dragging me along? Oh, they'll probably love you more than Morgan. They never thought much of him, Holly replied with a chuckle. What can I say? The cab dropped us off at what looked to me like a rather fancy boat or even a private yacht. It turned out to be some kind of charter fishing boat, and it had impressive acceleration. During the trip to the Bahamas, Holly spent most of her time sunbathing on deck in a tiny bikini. I spent time on the bridge, where the captain was supposedly showing me how to steer the boat while we were actually gazing at Holly's slender body. Daddy, said Holly, hugging the old man who met us on the quay. This is Mike. That was his wife Morgan was playing with, Holly said, introducing us. Hi, son, he said, shaking my hand and then Holly's. I told you could never trust that little shit. But no, you always thought you knew better. All right, Mike, let's get you home and change you into something appropriate. I realized that my business suit was not considered appropriate attire for the Bahamas. At the house, a large cluttered structure that bore little resemblance to the homes I'd been in before, I met Holly's mother who greeted me like a long-lost son. Shame on my reserved English nature. When Holly's father escorted me to my room, though, things got a little official. Let's just say he made sure I understood where my room was, and that's where he and his wife expected me to sleep. You get the idea. The next 4 days were really enjoyable. When Holly and I weren't sunbathing or swimming in the pool, I was either fishing off the boat with Holly's dad or we were at numerous cocktail parties in the evenings. At two of them, Holly danced with me, but she was somewhat more chaste than she had been that first night at the Miami hotel. On the last night before we left, Holly and I were finishing an evening stroll along the beach in the moonlight. We weren't in each other's arms, but she was holding my hand. We talked about how upset I was that my divorce was going to cost me the house I'd spent so many years remodeling to my taste. Avril always let me do whatever I wanted with the house. She just picked out the color scheme and everything. The extension and even the kitchen and bathrooms were always in my plan, as was my garage and workshop. God, how I'm going to miss that workshop. Mike, I want to apologize, Holly said suddenly. Apologize for what, Holly? Well, that first night in Miami, I got a little ahead of myself. Holly, we were both very nervous about what was going to happen. I think we both drank a little more than we should have and said some things we shouldn't have. It served as a cover for our nervousness. That's all we have to worry about. I know, but I'd hate for you to think that I would flirt with someone like that. Shit, don't be silly, girl. I understand perfectly well. I have to apologize. I really didn't control myself like I should have. Yeah, I noticed, big boy. Anyway, we're not the kind of people who give in to our baser instincts like Morgan and Avril, are we? Absolutely not, Holly. We've been together for almost 5 days and we haven't even kissed since that first night. Why do you think that is? I'm not really sure. You're a very attractive woman and I enjoyed being your official lipstick, but we have to take into consideration that in some ways, we are both on what you might call a rebound. How many relationships are known that would have lasted normally when they started under these circumstances? Yes, I have to admit that they usually result in heartache for everyone at the end, Holly said quietly. Besides, we're still married, Holly, even if our spouses seem to have overlooked that fact. Yes, you're right. We're above that kind of behavior, aren't we? Unfortunately, I replied. Does that mean you can't smudge my lipstick at least once before you leave? Holly, like I said, I'm pretty damn sure I'd be happy to apply for a full-time job as your lipstick smudger. Okay, I spent the next half hour or so watching Holly's lipstick smudge. During this time, Holly tried to find out if my tonsils were still intact by using her tongue as a probe. By the time we got back to her parents' house, however, we were acting like rank good friends. The next day, the same boat took us back to the mainland with even more speed than before. Then Holly walked me to the airport for my flight back to the UK. Come on, I smeared Holly's lipstick again before getting on the plane. When I finally got back to the house, Avril was already waiting for me. Surprisingly, there weren't many fireworks. Hi, sorry Mike, I messed up, didn't I? Said a very depressed Avril when I found her sitting in the kitchen. I just can't understand why, Avril. I thought we had a good thing going here. Yeah, Mike, I just got caught up in my work. I'm really sorry that all of this came to me. I really didn't mean to cheat on you or anything. God, Mike, I still love you. Yeah. So, how do you feel about him? Hell, please don't ask. He flattered and seduced me. I acted like a stupid little schoolgirl. Did you, with his wife? Avril was all I had to say. Hell, I might have known you wouldn't do that. Now you're gonna tell me we don't stand a chance, aren't you? You know me better than I know myself, Avril. When do you want me to move out, or will you? Provided you don't bring any of your lovers here, Avril, we can both live here until the house is sold. That will give us both time to find some decent accommodation. And the divorce, I'm willing to change the grounds to irreconcilable differences, provided we can come to an amicable agreement on finances. That should get us a quick divorce. Take the papers and show me where to sign, Mike. I messed up so I won't give you any more trouble, Avril said humbly. That's how it really was. The divorce went through within a few months. It didn't take long to sell the house. It had been on the market for less than 2 months when a real estate agent came along and bought it on behalf of his client. Strange guy never struck me as a real estate agent. At any rate, we never even saw the buyers or knew their names. After much negotiation, he even bought almost all the furniture. I was moving into rented furnished accommodation and Avril, having been fired by her employer, suddenly found herself being hunted by another American company. She left England for California before the divorce was even finalized. I don't know. Maybe 2 months later, I got a call from the agent of the people who bought our house. It seems my client is having some trouble controlling the central heating system, Mr. Crosby. We were wondering if you could kindly pop in to see them tonight and explain how to do it, he asked. I don't see why they would have any problems. It's a pretty standard system. But then again, that damn electronic timer is a bit of a crapshoot to get your head around. Yeah, tell them I'll stop by tonight on my way home from work and see if there's anything I can do to help. By the way, what are their names? I asked. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. I'll tell them to expect you around 7:30. Goodbye. He answered, and the connection went dead. That's strange. I remember thinking, how the hell did he know I was getting there at 7:30? That was the time I always came home from work when I lived there, and the bastard hung up on me without giving me his name. The garden looked pretty much the same when I turned into the driveway. That's if you ignore the little sign proudly informing everyone that the new homeowner was using some local gardening company to mow the lawns, etc. There were no cars in the driveway, so I parked in my old spot. With a heavy heart, I walked to the front door and pressed the button. It's very strange, coming back to the house you used to live in and finding that you have to ring the doorbell instead of just putting the key in the lock and walking in. Who is it? There was a voice from behind the closed door. Mike Crosby, I shouted back. I came in to explain the heating system. I could hear all the locks and deadbolts I had installed on that door with my own hands being pushed back and opened. Most of them were for when we went to bed or left the house empty. I never expected anyone to use them all the time. Finally, the door opened and a girl of about 18 opened the door and invited me in. The landlady is waiting in the living room. The girl said it very precisely, as if she had rehearsed the line. Then she giggled and ran into the kitchen. After knocking, I opened the living room door. I'm Mike Crosby. I believe you're having some trouble with the central heating, I said to the woman with her back to me, looking out into the garden behind the house. No, the heating is working fine, Mike. What I'm really looking for is someone to smear my lipstick on, she said, turning and coming into my arms. Epilogue. It's funny how things can turn out, but I never got to spend another night alone in my apartment. Holly and I got married less than 2 months later. I no longer work at the hospital. I am now a joint representative for Holly's father, along with Holly, in the UK and Europe. This guy gets involved in everything he can think of. To be honest, I'm a bit of a mess most of the time, although I do pick up a few things from Holly as I go along. Not that there's much to do there other than represent. I get the feeling that Holly's dad just wants to make sure I can afford to keep Holly the way she's used to. Anyway, in a few months, Holly's gonna have to stop chasing me all over Europe. Well, you can't carry a baby around with you, can you? No, I still wouldn't fly if I could. Honestly, life since we've been married has been like one long car vacation, a very nice one in a brand new Beamer. What do people call it? Oh yes, I think I fell on my feet and also fell in love with one of the most beautiful women in the world. Most nights when we go away, we spend in luxury hotels. I've realized that the nights are more exhausting than the driving, as I've discovered that Holly can be insatiable at times. God only knows how Morgan found the strength to sleep with Avril, but Holly insists that I'm much better than Morgan in that regard. Perhaps he never gave Holly and her needs as much attention as she deserved. Mind you, sometimes I think my new wife has a really twisted sense of humor. One morning, I was coming out of our home bathroom and saw Holly say thank you to a picture she had hidden in one of the dresser drawers. Then she looked very embarrassed when she realized I had seen it. I, of course, asked who was in the picture. You won't believe this. It's a portrait of your ex-wife Avril. Holly replied with a smile. Well, Mike, you have to admit that if Avril hadn't let Morgan talk her into bed with him, I never would have found you, would I? I'll always have a soft spot for her, Yes, that's a different way of looking at things. I walked over to the dresser and picked up the picture. Thank you, Avril. I never would have thought that the way you run around me and cheat on me would eventually lead me to such happiness, I said. Then I put the picture back in the drawer and turned my attention back to the woman who really mattered to me. It must have been almost lunchtime when we went out for some fresh air again and went downstairs for breakfast. God, was I really that tired? Life goes on. Wow, what an intense and emotional journey. If you were as captivated by this story as we were, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another gripping tale. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Until next time, stay tuned for more unbelievable stories that will keep you